This was a very good start for this session. So next up, it's Juni, right?
Juni.
Yeung from Toronto. She has her own Chin Society in Toronto now already for 15, 18 years almost, I think.
Yes.
And you are obviously also a Chin player yourself. You took lessons with Ding Chungyun, I think, and Zheng Chengwei.
Yes, I started with Zheng Chengwei and then moved later on in 2016 to Ding Chungyun.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. And now you're going to
But
address
the theoretical
the topic
stuff
of the.
is my own work.
Okay. So now you're going to address the nine-stringed chin and issues of tuning. The floor is yours, Juni.
Thank you. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to panel 3, where we talk about timbres and different pitches. So I'm going to be noting that this talk will be somewhat continuing on the discussion subject that Dr. Tay started. And while we may be talking about 9-string chins and the historical stories about the folly of doing all this, I want to go back to a more fundamental question. Why the heck does a chin have to have 7 strings? Now, when you're a newcomer to the chin world, you are often taught by a teacher that, you know, the first chin has the 5 sound, therefore has 5 strings, which is 弓香诀指语, the 5 strings, that's what they're called. Later on, you have the Wen string and the Wu string, which are attributed to kings Wen and Wu of the founders of Zhou dynasty. And but reality is that when we dug up actual chins, we found that there were 5-string chins, 10-string chins that came out. So obviously 7 was not exactly the number that we found. And then in our historical sources, we know that 7 was the number that they sort of stabilized on around the Tang times, and our earliest surviving instruments are indeed that. And on paper, we know that in a song that Song Taizong added to a 9-string chin. No surviving records of the pieces or the instruments exist now, but we do know that he was basically laughed off. And in the chin tunings that we have, they play largely pentatonic tones with accidentals that are possible through some harmonic use as well as pressed notes in order to create chromatic or even microtonal sounds. Now I'm going to have here the opening lines of the Canadian national anthem, O Canada. So, O Canada, our home and native land. No, that was heptatonic. There are notes in there that are not pentatonic. True patriot love in all thy sons command, with glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. So here we have a lot of chromatic tones that are added in here that uses, on a standard tuning, fas, fa sharps, and sharp sols as well. There are some, but not many C's in here. So how do you play this on a chin with as little modifications to its tuning systems as possible? So for those chromatic tones, the most logical answer would be to use pressed notes. As you can see, I have crossed them in red. That's the pressed notes that are microtonal, and I put those chromatic tones in there. But how do you put them in a way so that they sound reasonable to play to a traditional chin player? First of all, you need to convert the entire piece to a mode, or the starting tone, that is suitable with chin. So, for example, the original O Canada piece is E flat major. It's F major. So I switched it to E flat major. Reason being, because I needed extra sounds in there, I converted it to E flat, which is the 2nd string of qi liang tuning. So the same tuning you play your hua xiu yin, li sol, qu yuan, wen du, and so forth. So you tighten 5th string, and then you tighten 2nd string. But you do not tighten 7th string, so that 2 and 7 strings are basically do, si together. And you would have that 6th note in there. That would make it possible for you to play more tones in there. So that's a trait of external tuning on the 7-string zither, that you can play a 6th note by tuning to certain external tunings because they feature a 6th sound of the scale. And that is possible, as I said, by converting to your TM tuning. And thankfully, O Canada was a relatively simple enough piece to adopt. Try say God Save the King, or even worse, the Star Spangled Banner, which has a lot more chromatic tones in there. Now, you can try like putting all of them into pressed notes, but as Dr. Tay would say, it would sound awfully monotonous, and it would sound not very chin music-like if everything was rendered in pressed notes. So in order to have it sound like real chin music, you must be able to portray those different pitches in all the timbre potentialities in this instrument. So we need our harmonics and we need our open sounds. While we sometimes can switch around the pieces in order to fit the modes that are available on the chin, sometimes we have to work our way around. And as I said, the aesthetics of chin music basically are going to the 3 different timbres, and if you study court music, they'll call it the 4 different sounds. The zheng, ying, he, tong. The proper open sounds, the pressed open sound, which is the dominant 1/5 below in order to get the same pitch, the matching sound, which is lower 1/5, and then you play those together. This is the traditional Chinese expression of how the major same sounds actually occur. And they come in different timbres, as well as sometimes down 1/5 is considered the same pitch because they are the natural derivative of one tone or another. So in short, we still need to play those open and harmonic timbres at the pitches that we want. So increasingly, we are looking at modern compositions relying on this stop notes in order to play these uncommon or undiscovered tones on the instrument. And sometimes when they have to retune these strings, they would have to disregard traditional patterns or orders of how those strings are tuned. They would just simply say, oh, this string I'm gonna get an electronic tuner and retune it to a certain pitch. It would destroy the internal order of the instrument and the 7 strings in order for it to reach a certain pitch that's desired. So for example, my student, Ryan Blugerman, created this piece in 2020. He calls that this scale is an Indian raga of C, D flat, F, G, B flat, C, and D flat. And he didn't have a way to tune it until I basically calculated the thing for him. I said, well, you've got a B flat there, so you can tighten 5th string like your Arabian tuning. But how do you get your D to go flat? Because as you have CDM tuning before, you would raise it into an E flat instead. But how do you go to a D flat instead? So I had to pull some strings and bend the rules a little and drop it using the adjust in tone harmonics at the 3rd and 4th way. So that resulted in your D flat. But this is basically bending the rules. Other composers did not have even this level of consideration. So for example, back in the 80s, Zhou Long, when he created Saw, he just lowered 3rd string and 4th string, and there wasn't as much reliance on the relations between the strings each other in order to tune his piece. Same thing goes for Xin Life by Han Wenhe, which goes like C, D, F sharp, G, B flat, C, E flat. So it tightens 3rd, 5, and 7. Whereas traditionally it's 2, 5, and 7. So again, very irregular external tunings. This means that one will need an external tuner to achieve the gamuts that they're trying to go for. So in other words, this is a very messy system. It's improv, it's ad hoc. Something needs to change. So we go back to what I said earlier, the 侧弄 And on here we go. On standard tuning, 三分弦一 harmonic can reach 6 tones, while just in tone thirds offer you 3 more tones, but on a fixed octave. They're all on a very high, sharp kind of octave, and it's slightly flat of the 三分 tones as well. But if you sort of eke with it, you basically get around 10 tones in total, with 7 tones that are being with variable octaves. So the 三分弦 you can go low pitch, high pitch, but the last 3 you can only get it in 1 octave. So that's not ideal. And yes, open tones, there needs to be at least 1 perfect, yes. For the Guqin, as we know, strings 1 and 6, 2 and 7 are perfect octaves. So for a Guqin to sound like a Guqin, you need to have those perfect octaves. So a chin needs to have at least 1 pair of strings that have matching perfect octave sounds in order to establish the fact that your chin is tuned and in order. So that's a fundamental rule. So once again, after having all these ponderances, we go back to why does a chin have to be 7 strings? So when we go back to calculating the having all the sounds of the scale that you want, or the mode that you want, you also need to demonstrate that the sounds are tuned properly by going back to your fundamental pitch, your gong. So the minimum amount of strings that you must have must keep on going in the cycle without reversing the cycle of the tuning. So if you guys will remember your fan yin tuning exercises, you keep on going in one direction and you don't basically reverse direction. That's basically what I'm saying. And this is often mentioned in classical canon. So your original 5-string setup would say that 宫商角徵 your 5 strings, and your traditional accounts would say that for a 5-string instrument, the lowest string would be a gong sound and the highest string would be a yu sound. So 宫商角徵 like that. But that's not what our 7-string instrument is these days. But yeah, that 5 strings by itself is not enough to go back to the gong sound as you have. Because once you have from gong, you go to zhi, so from do to sol, to re, to la, to mi, and then you couldn't go anymore. But then once you have strings 6 and 7, you can, which I'll demonstrate here. But anyway, the other tuning system that we have, which we have on our chins now, so you look at strings 1 through 5, it's sol, la, do, re, mi. Why is that? First of all, this different order came from the numbers that came from the 管子地缘篇, where you have the 索拉, the zhi and yu as being longer pitch bytes or longer numbers than the gong sound. And Professor Ding Chengyun actually suggested that this order is used to tune ses, not chins. So we have a precedence that other instruments are tuned this way. And after talking on the Facebook International group, thanks guys, Alex Cortez summarized that the 7-string setup is the most perfectly symmetrical distribution of tones that yields the pentatonic scale. Any other distribution yields a major third between any of the bracketed pairs of the strings, but this one only fifths. As you can see with the butterfly loop thing, the Mobius at the top, you can see that by having 2 extra strings, you are allowed to go past your jue sound at the end, which is string 5 there, bend yourself back, and you can jump back to the origin point. This is basically how your 7 strings tuning goes. You are going around to the end of your gamut, and then on a new octave, bend backwards to the last, go back on the cycle of fifths, and then go back to the origin. So when we tune a chin, this is basically what we're doing. We don't go through the entire circle, the cycle of fifths. We only go 1 arc and then we bend back. And to go for having the huangzhong as the lowest tone, because there are several rules to tuning. The first string must be huangzhong, but then we need to have a present gongshang zhi yu, all the 5 sounds in there. So we chose to have gong string on, the mode that we're using, the gong string is on the 3rd string, but then huangzhong needs to be the first. So we have now our standard tuning, but at this kind of standard tuning setup that we have right now, we sacrifice Huangzhong as Gong as itself. We use Zhonglü or F as the Gong sound, but Zhonglü is the 11th jump on the cycle. So by doing so, every Qin player knows that our open string 3 technically cannot match with the pressed 10th of the first string, because that sound technically is not Zhonglü or the 11th jump. It is the -1 jump. So if you account for the Pythagorean comma, that's not the same tone. So they don't technically recognize that as the same thing. So it's an illegal move. But this is something that we live with. So given that we have all these rules that we've established, we know that in the Qin world, what makes a good standard tuning? 1. The setup should feature a centralized symmetrical layout of harmonic overtones. So in other words, your harmonic matching pairs should be symmetrical, not just to the two sides, but up and down. So you have equal amounts of pairs on the top half of the instrument as to the bottom half. Second, in order to create this symmetry, the unmatching pair, so your 3rd string, 5th string, set B, needs to be at the middle of the instrument and should straddle the middle of the instrument. Third, the tonal scale must be presented in whole. So for example, if you have a pentatonic scale, you must have do, re, mi, sol, la as an unbroken line in sequential order from the beginning to the end, somewhere along this instrument. And 4, that this scale that you present is a closed cycle. So in other words, you can't have like do, re, mi, and then sol, la, down like that. That would not make a very good standard tuning. You need to present it in order. So these are the 4 major requirements of how the scale that you want to present needs to be presented on standard tuning, whatever this instrument may be, pentatonic, heptatonic. So that's the basic rules I set for why standard tuning is standard tuning. So now that we're going past the need for pentatonic and we want to add more notes into our scale, we first go back to Sanfen system and we just generate 2 more notes, because that's how you generate your gamut, by going through the cycle of fifths and you get your next tones. And then by intuition or intuitive thought that if you have a 7-string instrument to create your pentatonic instrument, then if you want to add 2 more notes in there, you add 2 more strings to accommodate for it. Simple enough. So you add 2 more strings, so 7 plus 2, it's 9 strings. So does this system work? Short answer is, yeah, sort of does, but not completely. Because it qualifies for the rules 1 through 3, but this system, as you can see in this diagram, it fails rule number 4 in that it cannot return back to the original string. It cannot return back to the gong sound. In order to do so, you actually need 10 strings in order to finish the cycle. And the interface environment for the heptatonic setup, whereas in the pentatonic setup, where the tonic dominants are 4 strings apart. So for example, you see here in the red text, so for example, string 3 and string 6 on the huis 9 and 7, you have your set A having 2 strings in the middle, or 4 strings apart, and your small pairs would be 1 string in the middle or 2 strings apart. In the heptatonic system, every one of these pairs are further by 1 string. So that is the first trait I would like to introduce to you in a heptatonic setup. So all the pairs, matching pairs on this new heptatonic instrument is 1 string further apart. Now, there was this one case that despite these imperfections of the heptatonic design, that it can, on the 9-string instrument, that it cannot go back to the original fundamental sound, that does not mean that the 9-string setup is an untenable or unsound instrument. Now, because although there's no record in the Song Shi that Song Taizhong's instrument was used as a heptatonic instrument, it is possible that it's not as simple as what Zhu Wenji simply presented as a counter case because Zhu Wenji, as you know, played the 9-string qin as if it was only 7. He only used 7 of the strings, tuned them pentatonically, played Feng Ru Song, and wowed the crowd at the place. But I think that because there was this 9-string instrument, I don't think that it was simply set up in the pentatonic way that it was suggested. Maybe there's something more to it. Why am I suggesting this? Because if you look at the larger musical environment at the time, the Tang and Song era is an age of strong heptatonism and popular music. Now, there is a possible attempt that this line of thinking that I'm suggesting right now was already being thought about and is being drafted for a new era. So what I'm presenting to you here is that they might be looking into another concept known as the diao, which holds several connotations here. Diao or tiao could mean tiao xian, a tuning of the string, or it could be the diao yin, the mode, or it could be the yin jiao, the scale. So it is one word, it's written the same, but it's a trinity of different concepts, and the trinity stands as one. So first of all, in the Qin world, there's something called internal and external tunings. So as I said before, you have standard tuning. I switched it to Qi Liang Diao to play a different mode that starts on a different scale. Those modes are organized in a rational and mathematical manner. In order to do so, for example, you look at this chart right here. You start from the middle. That's standard tuning. By progressively tightening, go up, or loosening, go down, strings in the correct order, you can switch your fundamental, your gong, to different strings, and you would start your scale from a different string. And because you're also loosening strings at the same time, you're changing the relations between string to string. So that's how you're cycling through the cycle of fifths with this motion. And within pentatonism, there are 12 common external tunings, which I've listed them all here. 5 of which are used as unique tunings, because the other ones, which are in white, they sound modally the same as the 5 in the center, but they start on a 1 semitone higher or lower. That's why when we learn our external tunings, we only learn 5 of them, because the 5 of them could represent all 12, because chins are relatively tuned. You don't need to tune them on absolute pitch. So that's how we sort of ease our way out. But in any case, furthering on this cycle, for example, Qi Liang Diao is not on this list here because of the 2nd and 7th string is Do and Si. That's an accidental. That's the second type of external tuning, which is not here. But I want to show you under heptatonism, how many more possible tunings are there, and how many of them are unique. So of the 12 modes that we have, of the 12 semitones, 7 of them, rather than 5 of them, will be modally unique, because we have a heptatonic system. So there are 7 notes to start from, so therefore there are 7 modes. And we are going to be using the Lydian mode, the Gong mode, as our standard of measure, and we move up the cycle of fifths up and down. And the order of strings that we are tightening and loosening will be exactly the opposite of the ones that we are used to. So for example, when we tighten our strings, the first string we tighten is string 5 on the 7th string qin. But on the heptatonic system, you would loosen string 7 first, actually. Sorry, you would loosen string 6, which is your old string 5, by the way. Because on the pentatonic system, you would need to reach 7 lu to go around the missing side of your fan in order to reach the next note of your 5 notes, your fan. But on the heptatonic note, you only need to reach 5 lu, or 5 semitones, to reach the other side. So because it's the exact opposite, pentatonism and heptatonism are 2 sides of the same coin. So when you twist your chin strings, they go in the opposite direction in heptatonism. Every tuning in this cycle can pick out 7 modes. Because we have 7 modes, Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Si, in every one of these, it is possible to pick out numerous modes in here in every tuning. So each, unlike in Guqin tuning, where standard tuning has 5 recognized modes, and most external tunings are only recognized as legitimate modes in 1 or 2 configurations. In heptatonism, each one of them have, all 7 of them can be used as a mode of its own. But of the Chinese recognized ones, we will say that there are 4. And the 4 of them times the 7 commonly used modes that we have equals 28. And that happens to be the same 28 modes that are used for Tang banquet music, the 燕乐28调. And I have listed them all here on the side. So 8 sampan harmonics and 3 just intoned harmonics. So every one of these tunings, you would have 11 tones at your disposal. With the only missing tone is fa, but in order to use a fa, all you need to do is just perceive each one of these modes down a 5th, and you would get your fa anyway. So it's very convenient. So here again is that chart, but presented with all the redundant tuning configurations presented as well. What you saw last page was just the middle. So the middle ones here are the commonly used ones, and the modally redundant ones are on the left and right side. So here I have presented a tool for new composers to use for making heptatonic music on a chin or a chin-like instrument. So here are some thoughts that I have for what we can do with a 9-string instrument. Aside from playing heptatonically, we can also tune this instrument pentatonically, the traditional way. So what kind of other things what insights can we get from this kind of setup? So for example, if we tune our instrument like sol, la, do, fa, sol, la, do, re, like this, basically you tune your first 7 strings in the BU tuning, and if you keep on going, you will find that the latter 7 strings play man shang. So you can play your qiu xiao bu yue on your first 7 strings, and then on the latter half 7 strings, you can play guangling san, which gives a lot of insight about the relationship between BU tuning and man shang tuning, because they're both external tunings. They seem to pop out of nowhere. Like, why would you slacken a string so that they sound the same as the last string? So for a long time, we never explained why that tuning is tuned the way that is. But by linking these things together and seeing them as just a shift of the same idea or the same mode, but just continued onwards, we gain new insights to our external tunings as well. Of course, there's also a textbook in the late Ming called the Li Xing Yuan Ya that has 9-string chin music that we can play directly. This is a simple one. And for playing heptatonically, we would now have a permanent access to either fa or sharp fa and 7 on open and harmonic positions on changeable different octaves. This is huge. So for anyone who is playing anywhere from Tang banquet music all the way to Western pop or classical adaptations to the Guqin, no longer would we have to be bound to microtonal stop tones. We can play our music using natural harmonics. That is what I'm trying to bring to you. And what's more, by bringing in the 28 Yeung modes, we are finally bridging that gap where we have an easy and direct correlation to the Guqin with Tang Song manuscripts for other instruments, which, as you know, the Guqin was left behind from the Tang Song period because they could not adapt this pentatonic instrument to the heptatonic music that they were played. If they do, the most they could do was using stop notes as accidentals.
Time's up.
Okay, good. So yes, this is perhaps the thing that I wanted to bring out to you, and I'll skip the part about the specificity of the 9-string compared with the 10-string one. That in that song setups start from D because apparently the song system uses Taizu as the fundamental note rather than Huangzhong. So maybe they're onto something here. But anyway, thank you for listening. Sorry for blazing through a rather complicated concept, and I hope you have some questions for me now. I'm opening for questions.
questions for June? You didn't answer the question why you should play O Canada on a chin. Or God Save the King. There's one question over there.
Sorry, it's more for clarification. I was just not. So you mentioned that having a 10th string would solve some of the issues that the 9th string was having. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that? Like why 9 versus 10 if 10 sorts out some issues?
Sure. I'll give you an easy example. What happens if your chin only had 6 strings and you try to tune your instrument by harmonics? You would find that you will run out of strings. So once you get to, let's say, set A, 1, 4, 4, 2, and then 2, 5, and then 5, you would do a 7, right? But you don't have a 7.
Yeah.
If you go 5, 3, that's the unmatching pair. That wouldn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. By having 9, you would be actually missing 1 string at the top. That is if your gong sound, your fundamental, is on string 3, on the 9th string, on the 9th string instrument. So on the 10th string instrument, your fundamental is on string 4.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, I think we have to round up because the 30 minutes are gone, but thanks a lot for a fascinating excursion. And we move on to the next speaker. So we have Chung Pei Yo.